The late afternoon sun hung low over the pines, casting long shadows across the gravel drive as I pulled up to our little house just outside town. I'd spent the day at the library, sorting donated paperbacks and chatting with the regulars, old men with weathered hands and stories of their own. It was a routine I loved, a quiet rhythm to my days. But today, fatigue tugged at me, urging me home earlier than usual. I expected the familiar hum of my husband's jazz records drifting through the open windows, or the clatter of Lucas, my stepson, wrenching on that beat-up motorcycle of his in the garage. Instead, the air was still, heavy with the scent of cedar and the distant chirp of crickets waking for the night. I slipped off my flats at the door, the cool hardwood a relief beneath my feet. The house felt different, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. My husband was off on a fishing trip with his buddies, not due back till Sunday, and Lucas usually filled the silence with his own brand of noise. I set my bag on the counter, glancing at the kitchen clock, barely past 6. Maybe he was napping, I thought, or out sketching by the creek like he sometimes did. His art school projects scattered across his room in bursts of charcoal and ink. Then I saw it, a thin sliver of light spilling from beneath the den door. We didn't use that room much, just for Christmas gatherings or late-night talks when the power went out and the fireplace was our only warmth. A flicker of unease nudged me forward. I patted across the hall, my hand hesitating on the knob. What if it was a raccoon again, rummaging through the old bookshelves? I pushed the door open just a crack, silent as a whisper, and froze. There was Lucas, sprawled across the leather recliner that had been my father's before it was ours. His flannel shirt hung open, unbuttoned down the front, exposing a chest carved from years of hauling lumber and tinkering with engines. His jeans were tugged low, and one hand moved beneath the denim with a steady, deliberate rhythm. The old TV flickered in the corner, a muted western playing, John Wayne mid-standoff, oblivious to the scene unfolding in front of it. Lucas's eyes were shut tight, his jaw clenched, a sheen of sweat catching the light across his brow. The outline of him strained against the fabric, bold and unapologetic, a testament to the man he'd become at 22. My breath hitched, a sharp little gasp I barely swallowed. Shock pinned me there, a deer in the headlights of something I wasn't meant to see. Lucas, the gangly kid I'd met 7 years ago when I married his dad, all elbows and shy smiles, was gone. In his place was this broad-shouldered figure, radiating a raw energy that filled the room. His hand moved again, slow and sure, and a soft sound slipped from his throat, low and unguarded. It snapped me out of my daze. I stepped back, careful not to let the floor creak, and eased the door shut. My heart slammed against my ribs like a drum as I retreated down the hall to my bedroom. The image of him burned into my mind. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it as if I could lock out what I'd just witnessed. The room smelled of lavender and cedar. My quilt draped over the bed like a hug I didn't deserve right now. I crossed to the window, pushing it open to let the evening breeze cool my flushed cheeks. Beyond the glass, fireflies blinked to life in the yard, tiny stars against the deepening blue. What did I just see? I murmured to myself, pressing a hand to my chest. My fingers trembled. Fingers. He didn't know I was there, but why can't I shake this feeling? I'd walked in on something private, something primal, and the weight of it settled over me like a fog. Lucas wasn't a boy anymore. I'd known that in theory, watching him grow into his own over the years. But this was different. This was real, undeniable, and it fetching a soft moan escaped him, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. I shouldn't have seen that. Shouldn't have felt that jolt of heat low in my belly. I turned from the window, sinking onto the edge of the bed, my mind a tangle of guilt and something I didn't dare name. The night stretched ahead, and I knew sleep wouldn't come easy, not with Lucas's face, taut with pleasure, flickering behind my closed eyes. My bedroom had always been a refuge, a cocoon of quilted blankets and the faint scent of cedar drifting from the dresser. Tonight, it felt like a cage. I stood at the window, the cool night air brushing my face, carrying the hum of crickets and the rustle of pine branches. Fireflies winked in the yard, their dance a quiet beauty I usually loved. But now, my eyes saw nothing. My mind was back in the den, replaying what I'd stumbled into. Lucas, his shirt flung open, his hand moving with that steady rhythm, his face a mask of raw, unguarded need. I pressed my palms to the sill, willing the image away, but it clung to me like damp cloth on a humid day. I turned from the window and paced to the bed, peeling off my sweater and tossing it over the chair. My skin prickled under my blouse. Too warm, too tight. I sank onto the mattress, running my fingers through my hair, trying to anchor myself with something ordinary. Tomorrow's grocery list. Milk, bread, that coffee Lucas liked, the library fundraiser next week. Anything to drown out the memory of him. But it was no use. His broad shoulders filled my thoughts, the way his chest rose and fell, the faint glisten of sweat on his skin. He was no longer the lanky teenager who'd once blushed when I caught him sneaking cookies before dinner. He was a man now, and I'd seen him in a way I never should have. "What's wrong with you, Grace?" I whispered, my voice swallowed by the stillness. Guilt gnawed at me, sharp and relentless. I was his stepmother. 7 years of packed lunches, late-night talks about his sketches, cheering at his high school graduation. I'd stitched up his torn jeans, taught him how to change a tire. That was my role, my place, not this, not standing in the shadows, watching something so private it felt like I'd stolen it from him. And yet, alongside the shame, a flicker of heat stirred deep inside me, a longing I hadn't felt in years. Not since the early days with his father, before routine dulled the edges of our marriage. I lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling where shadows shifted with the breeze. My hands rested on my stomach, then slid upward, tracing the familiar curves of my body through my blouse. I stopped, breath catching. "This is wrong," I muttered, but the words sounded hollow. My fingers moved again, hesitant, brushing over my ribs, then higher, until they grazed the swell beneath my bra. A shiver ran through me, soft and traitorous. I closed my eyes, and there he was. Lucas, his strong hands, the way they'd moved with such purpose. What would they feel like instead of mine? The thought slipped in unbidden, a forbidden whisper that sent a flush across my chest. I yanked my hands away, sitting up as if I could outrun the idea. "No," I said aloud, sharper this time, but the heat lingered, pooling low in my belly, insistent. It had been so long since I'd felt alive, since my skin had hummed with anything but exhaustion. My husband's fishing trips left me alone more often than not, and I'd grown used to the quiet. Too used to it, maybe. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, standing to pace again. But my body wouldn't settle. I crossed back to the window, resting my forehead against the glass, the coolness of faint balm. "Get a grip, Grace," I told myself, watching a firefly drift close then vanish. But the fantasy crept back, gentle yet unyielding. I sank onto the bed again, giving in just a little. My hands roamed once more, slipping beneath my blouse this time, the fabric whispering against my skin. I imagined Lucas's touch, calloused from his tools, warm, deliberate. A sigh escaped me, soft and trembling, as my fingers traced paths I hadn't explored in ages. The ache grew, a hollow yearning I couldn't name, building since the moment I'd seen him laid bare in the den. I let it take me, my breath quickening, the quilt bunching beneath me as I arched into the sensation. It was over too soon, leaving me breathless and spent, sprawled across the bed with my blouse askew. The guilt crashed in then, heavier than before, a weight pressing on my chest. "What am I doing?" I murmured, rolling onto my side, curling into myself. Lucas's face lingered behind my eyes, his parted lips, the tension in his jaw. It was a side of him I'd never known, one that pulled at me in ways I couldn't untangle. I tugged the quilt over me, the cool cotton no comfort against the storm inside. Sleep felt miles away, but I closed my eyes anyway, willing the night to swallow me whole. Tomorrow, I'd face him. I had to. But how? How do you look at someone the same way after seeing them like that? The question hung there, unanswered, as the crickets sang on outside. The kitchen smelled of pancakes and brewing coffee, a warm haze curling through the morning light that streamed past the lace curtains. I stood at the stove, flipping a golden disc in the skillet, the sizzle a steady rhythm against the quiet. Sunlight painted the oak table in soft stripes, glinting off the coffee pot I'd set to brew. Lucas's favorite dark roast, the kind he said kept him sharp for his early classes. It was a ritual I clung to, a slice of normalcy after last night's chaos. But my hands shook as I gripped the spatula, the memory of Lucas in the den flickering like a stubborn ember I couldn't stamp out. Footsteps thudded down the stairs, slow and deliberate. I straightened, smoothing my apron, my heart kicking up a notch. Lucas shuffled in, his hair a tousled mess, a sketchbook tucked under one arm. He wore a faded t-shirt and jeans, the kind that hugged his frame just enough to remind me of what I'd seen. "Morning," he mumbled, setting the book on the counter before reaching for a mug. His voice was rough, still thick with sleep, and he didn't meet my eyes. "Morning, Lucas," I said, pouring coffee into his cup, my fingers brushing the handle too long. "Sleep well?" I kept my tone light, but it felt brittle, like it might crack under the weight of what hung between us. He shrugged, taking the mug. Yeah. You?" His gaze darted to the floor, a faint flush creeping up his neck. I turned back to the stove, plating the pancakes, the silence stretching tight as a wire. "Lucas?" I started, setting the plate on the table and facing him. He froze mid-sip, his hazel eyes flicking up to mine, wary. I took a breath, steadying myself. "About last night. I got home early from the library. I didn't mean to, but I saw something in the den." My voice was calm, softer than I felt, but my pulse thudded in my ears. His mug clattered against the counter, coffee sloshing over the rim. "You... what?" he choked out, his face draining of color. He gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles whitening, and I saw the boy he used to be in the wide-eyed panic. I nodded, stepping closer, offering a small smile I hoped looked kind. "Yes, I saw you. And it's okay. I'm not upset or judging you." His shoulders hunched, like he wanted to shrink into the floorboards. "It's natural, Lucas. Private, sure, but nothing to be ashamed of." He stared at the counter, muttering, "I can't believe this is happening." His voice was barely a whisper, thick with mortification. I watched him, noting the stubble shadowing his jaw, the way his hands, strong, calloused from his tools, trembled slightly. He wasn't the kid I'd patched up after bike wrecks anymore. "Lucas, look at me," I said gently, waiting until those hazel eyes met mine, hesitant and raw. "There's no reason to feel ashamed. You're a young man, healthy, alive. It's normal to explore yourself. I just stumbled into it by accident." He blinked, his brow furrowing like he couldn't quite process my words. "I don't know what to say, Grace," he managed, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd had since he was 15. "You don't have to say anything," I replied, sliding into a chair and nudging his plate toward him. "But I want you to know I get it. It's your space, your moment. I shouldn't have been there." I paused, folding my hands in my lap, then pressed on. "And I know it can feel isolating, keeping that part of yourself hidden." He sat across from me, picking at the pancakes, his fork scraping the plate. "Yeah, I guess," he said, voice low, uncertain. "It's just weird you saw that." A flush crept up his cheeks again, and I caught the flecks of muscle under his sleeve as he shifted. "I know it's strange," I said, leaning forward just a little, "but maybe it doesn't have to be a secret. At least not from me. I'm here, Lucas. I've always been here." My words hung there, careful, an offer wrapped in understanding. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" he asked, his fork stilling. I smiled, soft but steady. "Just think about it. No rush. I want you to feel safe, not alone." I reached for my coffee, letting the warmth of the mug ground me as he mulled it over. "Okay," he said finally, nodding once, quick and sharp. "I'll think about it." He took a bite, chewing slowly, and I watched him. The air between us thick with something new. Awkward, yes, but laced with a fragile thread of trust. As he finished and grabbed his sketchbook to head out, I knew we'd crossed a line, however small, into uncharted ground. The den glowed with the soft crackle of the fireplace, flames licking at the logs I'd stacked earlier, casting a golden dance across the worn rug. I'd spent the day restless, dusting shelves and tending the garden, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind churned over Lucas and that morning's stilted talk. Now, evening draped the house in quiet, the scent of roast beef and mashed potatoes lingering from dinner. I stood by the hearth, a glass of bourbon in hand, the amber liquid catching the firelight as I swirled it. The door creaked open, and Lucas stepped in, his boots scuffing the hardwood, a faint whiff of motor oil trailing him. "Smells good in here," he said, tossing his jacket over the arm of the couch. He'd been out in the garage all afternoon, sketching or tinkering, I wasn't sure which. Sure. His t-shirt clung to his frame, smudged with grease, and his hair fell into his eyes as he sank into the cushions. "Thought I'd make something hearty," I replied, setting my glass on the mantel and crossing to the sideboard. "Hungry?" I plated a second helping, the clink of china sharp in the stillness, and handed it to him. He took it with a nod, digging in as I settled across from him in the old armchair, its leather creaking under me. We ate in near silence at first, forks scraping plates, the fire popping now and then. But the air felt different, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "How was your day?" I asked, sipping my bourbon, watching the way he speared a chunk of beef, his movements quick and sure. "Fine," he said, glancing up with a half-smile. "Got a sketch done. Fixed the carburetor, too." He paused, then added, "Yours?" "Busy," I said, swirling my glass. "Couldn't stop thinking about this morning, though." My voice dipped, teasing the edge of what we'd left unsaid. His fork slowed, and I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. "Yeah, about that," he started, setting his plate on the coffee table. "Been turning it over all day." He leaned back, hands resting on his thighs, fingers tapping a restless beat. I nodded, letting the bourbon warm my throat. "Me too, it's a lot, I know." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, the fire's heat brushing my skin. "But I meant what I said, Lucas. You don't have to hide, not from me." He rubbed his jaw, stubble rasping under his palm. "You're serious, aren't you?" His voice was low, testing, like he was feeling out the ground beneath him. "Dead serious," I said, meeting his gaze. "What if you didn't have to be alone in it? What if I was there, not judging, just with you?" The words hung there, bold yet soft, a lifeline tossed into the unknown. His eyes widened, a flush creeping up his neck. "You mean, watch me? That's—" He trailed off, shaking his head, a nervous laugh escaping. "I don't know, Grace." "Only if you want it," I said quickly, raising a hand. "No pressure, ever, just a thought. Maybe it could feel less lonely knowing I'm there. A kind of companionship." I kept my tone steady, gentle, letting him hear the care in it. He stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in his hazel eyes. "That's not something people do," he muttered, but there was a question in it, a crack in his defenses. "Maybe not," I admitted, smiling faintly. "But we're not most people, are we? I've seen you grow up, Lucas. I've got no interest in shaming you, just want you to feel safe." He shifted, leaning forward now, mirroring me. "And you'd just sit there?" His voice was hushed, curiosity edging out the doubt. "If that's what you're comfortable with," I said. "We'd figure it out together, set rules, make sure it's right for both of us. You'd call the shots." A long silence stretched between us, the fire's crackle the only sound. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. "Okay, I'll think it over. Maybe tomorrow night?" His eyes flicked to mine, searching, and I saw the trust there, fragile but real. "Tomorrow night works," I said, a wave of relief softening my shoulders. "We'll take it slow, talk it through first." I stood, moving to the hearth to pour him a splash of bourbon. "To figuring it out," I said, handing him the glass. He took it, clinking it against mine. To figuring it out, he echoed, a small grin tugging at his lips. We drank, the warmth spreading through me, and I sat back down, closer this time. So, ground rules, I began, setting my glass aside. You say stop, we stop. You need space, you get it. Clear? Clear, he said, nodding again. And you're sure about this? Only if you are, I replied, holding his gaze. It's about trust, Lucas, nothing else. He exhaled, a shaky breath, then smiled, a real one this time. All right, tomorrow then. He finished his drink and stood, stretching, the firelight outlining the strength in his frame. As he headed upstairs, the air buzzed with what we'd agreed to, a pact sealed in the glow of the flames. I stayed by the fire, sipping the last of my bourbon, the night ahead shimmering with possibility. The den hummed with quiet anticipation, the fireplace dimmed to a soft glow, embers pulsing like a slow heartbeat. I draped a blanket over the couch earlier, its wool soft against the worn cushions, and adjusted the lamps until the room bathed in a warm, shadowed haze. The air smelled faintly of pine and the roast from dinner, a comfort that steadied my nerves. I sat in the armchair, legs crossed, a glass of water in hand. Bourbon felt too bold for tonight. The clock on the mantel ticked past 8 when Lucas stepped in, his boots left at the door, bare feet silent on the hardwood. Hey, he said, his voice low, a little rough around the edges. He wore a plain gray t-shirt and loose jeans, his hair still damp from a shower. He hovered near the couch, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes flicking to mine then away. Hey, I replied, setting my glass down and offering a smile. You ready? My tone was gentle, an anchor in the tension threading through the room. He nodded, a quick jerk of his chin, and sank onto the couch, the blanket shifting under him. Yeah, just checking. He rubbed his palms on his thighs, a nervous tick, then looked at me fully. You're sure about this? Absolutely, I said, leaning forward slightly. Are you? We can stop any time. You say the word. I'm good, he said, exhaling a shaky breath. Just stay, okay? His eyes held mine, raw and open, a plea wrapped in trust. I'm right here, I promised, settling back, my hands resting in my lap. He gave a small nod, then reached for the hem of his shirt. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was testing the weight of each step. He pulled the fabric over his head, tossing it aside, revealing the broad planes of his chest, taut muscle under skin bronzed from summer work. My breath caught, just for a second, at the sight of him, so unguarded in the flickering light. He hesitated, fingers hovering at his jeans, then unbuttoned them with a quiet snap. The denim slid down his legs, pooling at his ankles before he kicked it off, leaving him in dark boxer briefs. The fabric hugged him close, the outline of his arousal already pressing against it, bold and unhidden. He glanced at me, a question in his eyes, and I nodded, silent, steady. You're comfortable? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, a final tether to make sure we were both grounded. Yeah, he murmured, leaning back against the cushions. His eyes drifted shut, lashes dark against his cheeks, and his hand moved to the waistband of his briefs. He paused there, chest rising with a deep breath, then slid them down, freeing himself. The sight sent a warmth curling through me. His length, thick and straining, a stark contrast to the vulnerability in his posture. He wrapped his hand around it, slow at first, testing, his thumb brushing the tip. I watched, heart pounding, my breath sinking with the rhythm of his movements. The room seemed to shrink, the crackle of the fire fading to a distant hum. His strokes grew surer, a quiet dance of shadow and light across his skin, each motion drawing a faint hitch in his breath. His free hand gripped the blanket, knuckles whitening, and a low sound rumbled from his throat. Soft, unguarded, like the creak of the house settling. My fingers tightened in my lap, a flush creeping up my neck. I was a witness, a silent thread woven into his moment, and yet it felt like more. Like I was holding space for something sacred. His pace quickened, his chest heaving now, muscles in his thighs tensing as he chased the edge. The air thickened, charged with his nearing release, and I couldn't look away, not from the way his jaw tightened, his lips parted, or the shudder that rippled through him when it hit. He came with a muffled groan, head tipping back, his hands slowing as warmth spilled over his fingers. For a moment, he just lay there, chest rising and falling, ragged breaths filling the silence. Then his eyes opened, finding mine, and the vulnerability in them pierced me. Open, searching, a mirror to the trust we'd built. "Lucas," I said softly, uncrossing my legs, ready to stand and give him space. But his hand shot out, fingers circling my wrist, light but firm. The touch jolted me, electric, rooting me in place. "Stay," he said, his voice a rough whisper, tugging at something deep inside me. "Please, I want you closer, for real." His gaze was steady now, a quiet boldness breaking through the haze. I hesitated, the line we'd drawn blurring before me. "You sure?" I asked, my pulse quickening under his grip. "Yeah," he said, releasing me but holding my eyes. "Just sit here." He patted the cushion beside him, an invitation I couldn't unread. I moved, slow and careful, settling next to him, the blanket soft against my legs. His warmth radiated, close enough to feel, and he shifted, turning slightly toward me. "Thanks," he murmured, a faint smile tugging at his lips, raw and real. "Always," I replied, resting my hand near his, not touching, not yet, but close enough to bridge the space. The fire glowed on, a witness to the shift between us, fragile and unspoken, as the night stretched deeper around us. The den pulsed with the fading warmth of the fire, embers glowing faintly in the hearth as shadows stretched long across the walls. I sat beside Lucas on the couch, the blanket beneath us soft and rumpled, his bare skin radiating heat inches from mine. His chest still rose and fell with uneven breaths, the aftermath of his release lingering in the flush across his neck. His hand rested near mine, fingers brushing the wool, and the air between us crackled. Quiet, heavy, alive. He turned his head, hazel eyes catching mine, soft but searching, like he was waiting for something. "Grace," he said, low and rough, his voice tugging at me. He shifted closer, his knee grazing mine, and reached for my hand. His touch was tentative, calloused fingers curling around mine, guiding them toward him. "I want this, with you." The words hung there, simple, unguarded, a line offered to cross. I swallowed, my throat tight, the weight of his request sinking in. "Lucas, I started, but he shook his head, a faint plea in his eyes. "Please," he murmured, pressing my hand gently against his thigh, warm and firm under my palm. "Just try." His gaze held mine, steady now, and I saw the trust there, the need, cutting through my hesitation. "Okay," I whispered, my voice trembling but sure. I let him lead, my fingers sliding higher under his guidance, brushing the edge where his skin met the dampness of his release. He inhaled sharply, a shiver running through him, and I felt it too, a spark igniting low in my belly, unfamiliar yet fierce. His hand stayed over mine, urging me on, and I moved with him, slow and careful, tracing the contours of his still sensitive length. His breath hitched, a soft sound escaping, and he leaned closer, his forehead brushing my shoulder. "You too," he said, his free hand reaching for me, fumbling at the hem of my blouse. His fingers slipped beneath, rough against the soft skin of my waist, and I arched into it, a quiet gasp slipping free. The sensation was electric, forbidden, a rush I hadn't known I craved. I guided his hand higher, past the curve of my ribs, until it rested over my heart, the thin fabric of my bra a fragile barrier. He pressed gently, exploratory, and I felt my pulse race under his touch. Our movements synced, a tentative dance of give and take. My hand moved with his rhythm, stroking him as he stirred again, his arousal building anew under my fingers. His breath grew ragged, hot against my neck, and his hand slid down, cupping me through my blouse, a bold squeeze that sent heat pooling between my legs. I shifted closer, the blanket tangling around us, and let my free hand rest on his chest, feeling the thud of his heart mirror mine. "Grace," he groaned, low and deep, his voice unraveling me. His hand tightened on me as mine did on him, and the room spun away, nothing left but the two of us. The friction of skin, the shared ache spiraling higher. He tensed beneath me, a shudder ripping through him, and warmth spilled over my hand again, his release pulling a muffled cry from his throat. The sight of him, undone, vulnerable, tipped me over too. My body clenched, a sudden wave crashing through me, sharp and unexpected, leaving me trembling against him. We collapsed together, a tangle of limbs and heavy breaths, the blanket twisted beneath us. His head rested on my shoulder, my arm draped over his back, and we stayed there, silent, the fire's last glow painting us in gold. "That was—" he started, his voice a soft rasp, trailing off as he nuzzled closer. "Good," I finished for him, my fingers threading through his hair, damp with sweat. "Different, but good." He nodded against me, a quiet hum of agreement, and I felt the shift. Stepmother and stepson no more, something new forged in the heat of the night. Eventually, we untangled, slow and careful, the air cooling around us. "Night," he murmured, standing, pulling his briefs back on with a shy glance my way. I smiled, tugging my blouse straight, and watched him head upstairs, his footsteps fading. I stayed in the den a moment longer, the stillness wrapping around me, heavy with what we'd done. There was no undoing it now. A threshold crossed, a bond reshaped. Morning filtered through the kitchen curtains, golden and sharp, as I set the table with coffee and bacon, the sizzle a familiar hymn. Lucas came down, quieter than usual, his eyes catching mine with a flicker of warmth. "Morning," he said, sliding into his chair, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Morning?" I echoed, pouring his coffee, our fingers brushing as I handed it over. We ate in a comfortable quiet, the clink of forks a gentle rhythm, the weight of last night unspoken but alive between us. "About last night," he said finally, his voice soft. "Your touch. It felt right. Safe." "I'm glad," I replied, my chest loosening. "It mattered to me too, that you felt that." He nodded, and we finished breakfast with easy talk of his classes, the day ahead, a new thread of closeness weaving through the mundane. As he left for college, backpack slung over his shoulder, he paused. "See you tonight," he said, and I smiled back, the promise of more hanging gentle and sure in the light of day.